It's brilliant and it helps in so many ways. Obviously, there's so many risks. A bit like the Kardashians, they have their fingers in so many different pies, doing so many different things, diversifying their income streams and their businesses. I remember we went into our first like online college session, and the tutor was like, "Be prepared to not have a life."
So tell me about cross border.
So, Cross Border is a company that I run with the co founder, Remy, and he is the CEO of Z Media. And essentially, we came together to help brands, especially e commerce brands, open overseas or in different countries, looking after their finance, logistics, and marketing. His whole business is around TikTok shop and marketing. So, that's where he comes in. I obviously look after the compliance, and then we do logistics as well.
That's a lot, right? Like some people would just co-found a company and that would be like the all of their work.
Yes, I'm riddled with ADHD and I cannot sit still. And I love a new project. If I just have one thing, I get bored really easily. So for me, I love taking on new projects and starting new businesses because everything is different, and that's what I really like about it.
How with that, like how do you think about balance? How do you think about focus and prioritization, right? Like I mean, tell me, like, do you feel like you actually have a bit of a superpower that you can think about multiple things at once, or do you still have to split things up and focus your time in different buckets?
Definitely, I think it's a bit of both. I can focus on loads of things at once, and that's one of the amazing things about ADHD. But also, it can be very overwhelming to think about so many things and have so many spinning plates. But the way I like to divvy it up is usually we have like a recurring meeting. So, for all the businesses I'm a co founder of, we have a recurring meeting usually like every week or every fortnight to catch up about the progress and what needs doing. And then I have time for my to do list anyway, which encompasses all the different projects I've got going on.
So in your head, you don't think about it as like this week or this month is Hardy accounting or this
No,
month is cross
every week is
border.
all of them.
Okay, okay. So would it be fair to say that you're like a new breed of like Elon? Like you might not want that association,
No,
but
not
like
really. Yeah,
who
I
would you
like.
think about it like? Like who would you maybe want to associate that level? Like I don't think I could focus on that many things. Like who would
Do
you
you know what? I not as I see myself, but it's a bit like their Kardashians. They have their fingers in so many different pies, doing so many different things, diversifying their income streams and their businesses. So if I was going to compare it to anything, it would probably be that.
like all of the Kardashians? Like
Yeah, yeah,
you're
yeah,
just
yeah.
all of them. Okay, okay. Um, and do you like so if I was to ask you, like you were to meet someone and you wanted to like make a good impression
Hmm.
and they were like, Grace, what do you do? Like what would you actually say? Like would you say that you're an accountant? I'm quite keen to understand how you would maybe like
Yeah.
define yourself right now.
So I always lead with the accounting. So I always lead with Hardy accounting, and then I go. I also do X, Y, Z as a side
Okay.
project.
Okay. So you very much like I guess identify yourself as an accountant still by
Yeah,
trade.
yeah.
Okay, okay. But then like cross border, presumably is that like that? Presumably that's a lot more than the CFO scope of work that you're doing for the fractional CFO clients. Like that's like a full co-founder business partnership where you're presumably
Yeah,
doing a lot of ops work, right? Like you're kind
yeah,
of like
yeah,
a founder entrepreneur.
yeah, exactly.
I'm curious if you think your like identity and brand will transition over time, like away from accounting and more into like you'll just be Grace, the
The
UK
businesswoman.
entrepreneur. Yeah, the businesswoman, the modern
Um,
businesswoman.
yeah, I'm not sure to be honest. I love being an accountant and being known as an accountant because I feel like that brings a lot of credibility to what I do, and I think that's really important, especially as a young female entrepreneur. Um, but I also think that it's great that I don't just fit in one box and I've got a lot of things going on. And I think as my personal brand expands, I'm quite known for being an accountant and being passionate about financial education. But as I start different businesses in different sectors, it may expand. However, in cross border, I am doing all the financy bits. So it basically is being an accountant or a finance manager. So it is all quite closely knit to my core as an accountant anyway.
Okay, okay. Why like keen to get into why accounting? So you were at school,
Yes.
and I believe you're very passionate about not going to university and starting your career immediately. You could have done that in many different industries. Like, it's not just accounting that has like a great apprenticeship setup. Why were you drawn to being an accountant?
I wasn't. It was a complete mistake. So I did my A levels. I did maths, economics, history, and politics because I'm a massive nerd. And there was one economics degree apprenticeship in the government, and I was like, that's what I want to do. That sounds really interesting. Get me on that apprenticeship now. So I applied for it. I got all the way to the assessment centre. The last task was a time written essay, and because I'm severely dyslexic and they didn't give me any extra time, I didn't finish it and I didn't get the apprenticeship. So I was really distraught, and that's when I was 17. And I was like, what do I even do now? Because that's what I wanted. And I put all my eggs in one basket, and there's nothing else like that in the UK. So very naively at 17, I thought, what's close to economics? Tax. So then I started applying for all these tax apprenticeships, but it was around maybe May or June to start in the September. So these roles were pretty much all filled. So a couple of employers turned around to me and said, look, you're great, we'd love you, but there's no space. So would you be interested in an accounting apprenticeship? I promise you it's got tax in it. And I was like, yeah, as long as it's got tax in it, like sign me up. So then I applied for a couple of those accounting apprenticeships and got a few offers, and then obviously picked the employer that I went with, and that's how I got into accounting.
Did you immediately sit down and go, "Oh, I'm not doing any tax"? Like, what were you doing? What did you think about it once you started? Like, you were there for 3 years, right? So,
Yeah.
like, unless you decided to spend no time focused on that and you secretly hated it, or maybe you did, like, actually not mind.
No, I thought it was brilliant. I got to basically be client facing from the first month I was there. The amount of experience was incredible. The width and breadth of clients was stunning. Like I got to work with some seriously cool clients. And I loved it. But I got to the end of the 3 years and I was like, I'm not sure what I want to do. I kind of got here by a mistake. Maybe I want to try work for another firm. I didn't really know what I wanted to do because all my friends were at university. I kind of wanted to have some space to find out what I was actually interested in. So I decided to leave that role with no plan. And I was like, I don't really know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to go to Bali and find myself like every other 20-year-old girl. And I was like, this is great. I've saved up over my apprenticeship, going to go live my best life by a waterfall. And then I was looking at flights, and then I didn't realize that it was rainy season, and it was rainy season for the next 3 months. And so I thought to myself, oh my God, what am I going to do for 3 months? I can go back to working as a waitress like I did when I was 16, 17. Um, or I've always wanted to be self employed, but I've actually never been particularly great at anything. So I didn't do anything. And so I was like, I came across the AAT Be Your Own Boss campaign, and I realized with the qualifications I had that I could start my own practice. And I was like, oh, well, that'd be pretty cool. So I got all the legal bits all sorted, and I said to myself, I'll give myself 3 months. And if it doesn't work, I'll go to Bali and live my best life. And if it does work, well, that'd be pretty cool because I'll have my own company. And that's what I did.
Who was your first client?
My first client was actually a like a fashion brand in Soho.
How did you find them? Like, did you know them before? Like, that must have been the hardest bit, right? Like, getting your first client on.
Yeah, so it was actually a family friend's daughter. They were looking for an accountant, and my aunt said, "Oh well, my niece has just started her own accounting firm, so put us in touch." Went out for coffee, got on really well, and that was the first client. And then all the others since have been through social media.
What did you? I'm keen to know. What did you do for the fashion brand? Like, did you do a self-assessment for the lady running it? Did you? What did you do? Did you do a VAT return for them?
So it was a partnership. There was five of them. So I did a partnership tax return, bookkeeping, and then it got to the stage where they needed to change and be a limited company. So then we incorporated them, made them a limited company, and then they became VAT registered. So start doing VAT returns for them as well.
Got you. Got you. How long did you have just then? Like, what was the ramp up on social media? Were you in this time when you met them for the coffee? Were you already thinking about go to market through social media, or was it more like you got started with the services and then had
No,
done
so it was
that
all
after?
social media first. So I hate networking events. I find that my ideal client just wasn't there to the ones that I was going to. They felt really draining. You have to go all the way there, socialize for like hours, and then come all the way home. And it's a lot of time, like a lot of like time investment. And it just wasn't working for me. So I thought, what do I do? And I'd seen loads of people like social media managers, marketing on TikTok and Instagram. And I was like, well, there's no reason why I can't do that. So I got Instagram and started posting like educational like videos and slideshows and carousels, and then started doing the same on TikTok. And I had to obviously grow it for a couple of months. But I think maybe by the second month, it really had picked up some sort of momentum that I just kept pushing. Um, and so I was like, okay, like this might work. So let's keep going.
Would you advise every person running a firm to market themselves on social media?
No, not at all. I don't think it's a necessity. I think you need to be where your clients are. And if your clients aren't on social media, then you don't need to waste your time there. Like if you know your clients are referrals or word of mouth or networking events, then spend your time and energy there. But for me, they just weren't. And my ideal clients do sit on social media. So that's where I spend the majority of my efforts marketing.
Okay, so Grace, so I'm an accountant as well. So say I want to set up a practice,
Yeah.
um, and I potentially want to get clients who, yeah, let's say they all sit on social media. What should I do to get started? Should I like look to perfect my first bit of content? Like how should I think about like frequency and like angle? Like I know nothing. Tell me.
So I would always start with your client avatar. So who is it that you're trying to get after? And then I'd like draw like a stick man and then do like their age, potentially their gender, where are they, what kind of business do they have, what's their income levels, what do they like to do on the weekend, and really go into as much depth as possible. And then from there you can create content ideas. So I do like a social media session at some talks, and I go like, what are their biggest obstacles and what are their biggest goals, and then how can you help them? And usually the answers to those questions is where you get the best content. So is it looking that they need someone to help them take over finance because they're sick of doing it and they don't understand it? Or are they looking for ways to save money that they don't already understand? So really going into like the depths of who your client is and that client avatar is the best way to start. And then with frequency, it's always difficult because the more you put out, the more likely you'll have that a video goes well or someone sees it and someone follows you. So it is always a volume game. But at the beginning, you just need to start. I think is always the biggest thing.
This just intuitive to you, Grace? Like you said you weren't good at anything particular. I don't believe that for a second. This all seems very intuitive and like all reasoned through. Like how did you learn this? Have you just like was it common sense to you, or did you have like mentors? Yeah,
No, it was just kind of learn by doing, I think, and chucking loads of stuff out there and seeing what stuck.
there must have
Yeah.
been signals from like earlier years at school, like primary school, year seven of excellence.
Not really. I really struggled in school. School was not a good period of time for me. I actually stopped going to school for a very long period of time and taught myself at home, which I guess is almost a weird signal. But I stopped really going in from year eight. I struggled so much with my dyslexia, and the teaching style I really struggled with as well. I was also just like very unwell as a child, so I ended up going to school in hospital for my GCSEs with one of my best friends. We were there for a bit. And then for A levels, I struggled really, really quite a lot. And again, it didn't go to sixth form. I got all my teachers to email me my work. So I just sat at home and I taught myself. And then I went to go like do my mock exams. And then also I was the COVID year for A levels. So I never actually got to sit them.
What was like if when you say like you struggled a lot, like and thinking to the earlier years, like year seven and eight, like
Yeah.
in particular, what was it that you were struggling with?
So I really struggle with reading and writing. And I struggle with the pace of the class. I also had it in my AAT exams, which I talk about quite a lot. It was online because it was during COVID, because I started my apprenticeship in September 2020. And so college was online. And so when just over the majority of the class was done, the tutor would then move on. So I always felt behind and I always felt like I wasn't finishing things. So I actually stopped going to college and again sat and taught myself in the study leave that I had to go to college and stopped attending the online lessons. Um, because I knew what worked for me in terms of a teaching style and how I could learn the best.
Did you have anyone like to support you in that time, or was it completely self-guided through any of the content you could find on the internet?
Yeah, so obviously we had study books and textbooks and things like that, so that's what I used.
From like a support group?
No, it was just me, myself, my laptop, my textbooks.
So if you were gonna like redesign how we would teach through year 7, 8, 9, 10,
Yeah.
how would you redesign that now? Like with your struggles in mind? Would you, what would the balance be between self-guided learning, but then also encouraging kids to come up into school? Like, would you encourage that? Were there downsides for you for not going to school?
I think it's always so difficult because you've got a class of what, 20 to 30 kids, and every single one of those kids is different and unique and has a different learning style. So I don't think I would redesign it at all. I was just very lucky that my school gave me the space to be able to teach myself in a way that worked for me. Because if I wasn't allowed to do that, then I would have just sat in all those classes and absolutely learned nothing. So I was very lucky that my school was open to what I wanted to do. And obviously, there's downsides of not going to school. You don't make as strong friendships or relationships because you're not actually there speaking to people. But for me, it wasn't hugely about that. I did loads of extracurricular activities. So I had loads of friends from gymnastics and tennis and swimming and all those sorts of things. But for me, school was about learning, and I couldn't learn in that normal classroom environment.
Okay, so you wouldn't actually redesign it, you'd keep it as it is, but maybe increase like the optionality that schools offer students?
Yeah, and obviously having more teachers that are specialised in learning disabilities like dyslexia and dyspraxia and dyscalculus and ADHD and all of those things, and just having a bit more awareness. Like, I got called stupid a lot by my teachers at school because I was so much slower than everyone else. And obviously, that has an effect on you. And it wasn't that I was stupid, it was just that my brain is slower at processing information than the average child. And so I think more awareness around those learning disabilities would have been a lot more helpful.
Can you share like what your experience is like? So if you were to be given, and maybe not to bring up like a not nice experience, but thinking back to that like economics internship essay that you had to do, or sorry, it was like an economics apprenticeship, right?
Yeah, yeah, but it was like a
Yeah,
time
yeah.
written essay.
Yeah. So thinking back to that time written essay, like what did you experience in that moment versus potentially what the average individual would have experienced in that situation?
Yeah, so I guess for me, it's there was a case study that we had to write about. So I struggle with reading, and so reading that case study takes a lot longer for me to process and understand, and I have to read it multiple times, and usually like with a ruler or a piece of paper or something. So because otherwise, like all the words like merge and move, which is obviously quite off-putting. So that bit would take longer than the average person to understand what's going on. And then for me, I have to write a plan of what I'm writing. Otherwise, I forget certain things. Because also with dyslexia comes short term memory loss, which is really bizarre. And so you have to plan things out, otherwise, you'll forget them. So then there's all that sort of like pre-preparation work before you write the essay. And then when it comes to writing the essay, I've got like obviously an inner monologue of what I want to write. But my mind and my hand just put incorrect words or duplicate words or forget words so that what I'm thinking I'm writing down doesn't actually come out on paper. Obviously, I'm horrible with spelling as well, which doesn't really help. Bit of a curveball. But again, all of that is just a lot of a slower process than the average person.
Okay, so there's two things. Well, I guess there's three things. There's the ability to ingest written information, and
Hmm.
then when you're processing, how you are thinking about like sequencing actions, you might have short-term memory loss on some of those steps.
Yeah.
So what could come out could like be less coherent. But then also when you intend to take that action to write down, there's like an element of disconnection between your intention and what actually gets put down.
Exactly. So eloquently put.
Does it carry through into typing or like
Yeah, it
speaking
does.
at all?
Yeah, so especially if I have to do speeches. So I was invited to Cambridge University to give a talk on apprenticeships, which I was like, oh my God, yeah, get me there. But I was also like, this is massive for my dyslexia because I'm having to A, write a speech that makes sense and is coherent and gets my point across. But also, I had then have to read that out loud. And even in school, I'd always avoid like when you have to like read a passage of a book out loud, I'd be like, no, please skip me, no one like look at me. And that for me was probably one of the scariest things I've done in my career, which sounds quite silly, but for me, those are really big obstacles. Um, I was very lucky that like it went well, and I was really pleased with it, and the feedback was really positive. But it does translate into writing emails, for example, writing reports, those board packs that I mentioned, it can come up there. And even in my old corporate job, all the feedback was Grace is brilliant, but when she writes out a report, sometimes it doesn't make any sense. And so then it does translate into speaking. So reading, obviously, I have slower processing. So being able to read something and then say it out loud is very difficult because you're processing things slower, but people are expecting you to say it straight away. So sometimes I'll miss chunks out, I'll stumble over my words, I'll have to take a pause because I'm like, oh my God, where am I?
And so, like, as we're speaking now, like, I might be asking you like three questions combined together, and I think generally people would struggle to remember the first and how they would sequence their answers. But you're giving like extremely well sequenced answers, and remembering all parts of the questions. Like, is that from an element of practice, or is that because it's like verbal in, verbal out, which doesn't trigger? Or help me understand, like, is this still
Yeah.
triggering it?
So this is much easier because I'm not reading from a script. I don't have any notes written down that I'm trying to read from. It's just like casual convo. Sometimes if I'm in a meeting and clients are saying things to me, maybe like 5 things that I need to go away and do, I need to take a list because I can go away from that meeting again. The short-term loss can kick in, and I go, oh God, I can't remember quite what I was doing. But for me, this is so much easier. I'm not having to read from anywhere. I'm not writing any notes down. So happy days.
Okay. And like, I'm kind of keen to understand what you've used, like tools you've used to date to help you with this, but then also keen to brainstorm on like these language models are excellent at taking in audio and giving out audio, and potentially could make everyone's lives like having a easy chit chat while they're doing heavy processing, heavy written language in and out. So keen to
Yeah.
understand like obstacles now and how you've overcome those, but then also like, do you have ideas for how these new AI models can help with dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD?
Yeah, so obviously obstacles still remain the same as I was in school. So that reading, that writing, the processing large chunks of information. So I use AI for a lot of it now. Obviously, love Grammarly, so helpful. But also taking documents and using AI to summarize the key points or creating steps for me to be able to like go through and understand. So AI has been so helpful in that for me personally, especially like drafting emails and things and checking them. I think AI is brilliant, but I also think it's important at a school age to maybe not rely on those so heavily, purely because you need to understand how your mind works and actually is there small things you can be doing, because obviously school is quite different. I can't sit and go, hey, can you summarize this case study for me, because I have to be able to use the processing in my own brain to decipher those. However, in the real world you can use tools like AI, so I think it's understanding when those should be introduced.
Yeah. Okay. And do you write emails by hand now? And do you make notes typing? Because what I could imagine like a workflow for you could be is that you'd use like Whisperflow to capture words that you're saying, and then you might use like a Claude style model with access to your emails, your calendars, Notion documents, and that would be able to update those. Help me understand what you're doing right now.
So at the moment, I try to do things by hand purely because if I don't, then actually I don't process the information because I haven't written it. So even for revising, I used to have to write everything out by hand because I don't process or understand things if I like haven't written them. So I'll usually try write the email so I can remember what's been sent out.
Okay.
And then I will use AI to obviously make it nicer and make sense and all those sorts of things.
Could you could like a best of both worlds be you initiate the intention? So let's say you wanted to email a client. You initiate the intention through like a verbal instruction of, hey, I'd love to email this person. I want to follow up and I'm really looking forward to seeing them in a few weeks' time for a site visit. The things I think in my head that we want to focus on are X, Y, Z, and I saw this that's relevant to them.
Yeah.
If you initiated that like verbally, and then the model using your tone was able to then draft and send that, would you feel like you'd get the best of both worlds in that way?
I think so. But I don't know. I quite like typing out emails. They're quite boring.
So what would you say, like if I'm just finishing school, I'm in year 13, maybe like say year 12, coming up to applications, how should I think about what my next steps are? How should I think about starting a career? Where would be the best place to do that? If I had like desires to learn more and deeper on a subject, is university a good place to do that? How should I think about all of it?
I think it's very dependent on who the individual is. I'm a big believer that university isn't for everyone, but also apprenticeships aren't for everyone too. So all my other siblings all went to university and for the most part loved it because it suited them and their learning style. I'm obviously a bit more practical. I learn by doing, and therefore an apprenticeship was the best choice for me. I don't learn by sitting in a lecture theatre and writing essays. I think that's pretty apparent now. So I think it's based on the individual and their learning style, but also what do they want to do? If you want to be a doctor, then by all means go to university. That's the best route for you. But if you want to become an accountant, probably the best route is an apprenticeship. Even if you go to university, I mean, I started training graduates when I was 18, 19. And so they would spend 3 years at university and then still have to do 3 years on an apprenticeship to become a qualified accountant. So I think it is very much dependent on A, who you are as an individual and your learning style, but also B, what career do you want to take and what's the fastest route to get there?
So to challenge that slightly in a positive way, do you think it's a learning style thing? Like, do you think anyone actually learns much by sitting in a lecture theatre and writing essays? Or do you think that some people just have a greater attenuation to action and learn by doing, and others maybe just don't learn too much practically at all?
I think again, every person is different. I know my sister, for example, she needs to like someone needs to like tell her what to do. She doesn't learn by doing. She needs to sit and have instructions and she learns that way by reading and researching and that suits her. That is my idea of hell. If someone was like, go away and watch this video, I'd be like, no, can we just like do it, please? So I think it is still very different. But obviously, I'm a massive advocate for apprenticeships purely because you get paid to learn, and like, what's better than that? There's no student debt. Obviously, it's been very apparent in the news that like the interest rates are absolutely horrific. I've got friends where their uni debts are like 80K and they're still trying to pay it back and it's a large chunk out of your pay slip. And so I think there should be more education around what a student loan means. I think a lot of people see it as free money and it's not. It's a loan. It's kind of in the name, and the repercussions that that can have once you are employed, and fully understanding that because I don't think it's taught in school.
100%. Yeah, like when I was deciding about going to university, the narrative was, don't worry about that thing. It's just going to be like this extra thing on your payslip.
Yeah.
If you earn a lot of money, you'll pay it down, and if you pick a career which is more like stable and less money focused, then you won't pay it all back, and it will get written off. That was the narrative. So how would you change that narrative now?
I think it's more of a conscious decision. I think again, as you said, people are really pushing that to one side and going, don't really worry about it because you don't really have to pay it back. But obviously now the repayment years have increased. So realistically you will be paying it off until you retire. So I think it needs to be the conversation of look, if you do an apprenticeship, you get paid and you have a salary and you can save and have a mortgage and all those sorts of things. If you go to university, you need to understand that you will be paying that money back once you hit the certain wage threshold. It will be around, like, I don't know, £200 to £400, depending on how much you earn per month. And you need to understand the consequences of that, and there's interest on it. And when you're getting a mortgage, it's still written down as a loan that you still need to pay off. So just having that full, almost like financial literacy education on what a student loan entails and how it can affect your future.
Yeah, I think it's actually a great vehicle for people to understand things like compound interest, for
Yeah.
people to understand like disposable income and like 200 to £400 being a reasonable chunk of disposable income. Like that's quite a lot. That's potentially like four very luxurious meals a month. That's potentially like four very kind presents a month that is just gone. One of the things that I think is not spoken about as well is the way the maths works is that if you earn close to a strong over just above average salary, for example, like a school teacher, say earning between 35 to £50,000, you sit at this level where you're constantly repaying slightly less than the interest. So
Yeah.
the loan is actually growing, but you're repaying so much that you're actually at like you have the worst of the tax.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think sometimes people understand that enough is that sometimes it's barely enough to cover the interest. So it keeps growing. You're not bringing it down at all. You can log in 6 months and it will actually have gone up, not the other way around.
How would you would you have any ambitions to suggest like how we could redesign the loan program? I know that the loan program was actually set up with quite good intentions. We don't have commercial loans. They don't affect our credit scores. They are controlled against income. So if you do earn less or if you go out of work, you don't need to repay anything back. And that's much greater than, say, like the student loan system in the United States. However, we're still not doing a good enough job about educating people about this liability they have. So, with that context, like, how would you further improve it?
I don't know. I think it's really difficult. I speak to a lot of universities, and actually, they're really struggling because it's international students that obviously pay their fees up front and therefore almost fund the university, quote unquote, purely because youth unemployment is up. And so, those people that have been in university are not paying back their student loans, and therefore, the universities and the government are then like struggling to fund universities. I mean, universities in my local area where I grew up in Oxford have had to shut down whole faculties because there's just not enough funding. So I think it needs to be a conversation between obviously the government and universities about how this can better impact them so that they're not struggling.
And maybe for some of the people running firms, people working at firms that are watching who may have children like approaching this stage, but they don't want to be like mum or dad and go into accounting. What are some other career paths that naturally lend themselves towards apprenticeships?
I think honestly, there's so many. When me and my mum were learning about apprenticeships, we went to like a national apprenticeship show. I think it was at Cheltenham Racecourse. Actually, it was a delightful day out, and there were hundreds of employers there in every single sector you could possibly think of. And so I think I was quite close minded about what industries offered apprenticeships. And that was obviously very naive of me because I didn't know what I knew now. But I think actually having that day out and speaking to those employers and understanding what's out there is the best way to possibly learn. And it was a lovely day out for me and my mum. It was really sweet. But the Ministry of Defence was there doing all sorts of apprenticeships around project management. Amazon, Lloyd's were there. There were loads of veterinary apprenticeships, nursing apprenticeships. Literally anything you can think of has an apprenticeship. So I always think to do both. If you're unsure, go speak to those universities about their courses, but also go to something like me and my mum did and speak to those employers, because they always bring apprentices too, so you can have really interesting conversations.
Okay, so you've done some work experience or an internship at the House of Lords, and I think you recently went back there to talk and share your experiences on apprenticeships, AI, and other bits of work you're doing. Should it be called the House of Lords and Ladies? Do you have ambitions to be a lady in the future? Talk to me about like how you got that work set up, what you learned from it, and then your work with them going forward.
Yeah, so I did that work experience literally ages ago. I think it was around Brexit time. It was amazing. It was the coolest work experience I could possibly ever think of. And I was so lucky to be able to have gone. And I basically just shadowed a lord. And we went to all of his really interesting meetings and picked up all the paperwork and spoke to loads of people. And it was honestly so fascinating. And I loved being in it. And obviously, it wasn't until I was lucky enough, obviously, to open my own firm that I was invited back to be able to speak at the House of Lords on a number of different topics, which is incredible, and I'm super grateful for. I think everyone would want to be a lady. It would be so cool, but a lot of work to get there.
Talk to me about some like ladies that inspire you. So, and they don't have to be like members of the House of Lords.
I
Just like
think
ladies in general.
Yeah, I think honestly there's so many. I think probably every woman is inspiring. I know that's super cliche to say, but like every woman has their own story and it's unique, and every woman's gone through something, and I find that really inspiring. But for me, Beth Flanagan, absolutely love her. She's super inspiring to me. I was her biggest fan when I met her and I thought she was so cool. Jo Wood as well was also another really big role model and inspiration for me, especially in accounting. But I think more generally, Grace Beverley. She's an incredible young woman who's built multiple successful businesses, and shares her journey really authentically online. Um, but honestly, there's so many.
Okay, thanks, Grace. Well, Joe and Bev are both they're both going to be guests of the brief. So that's very exciting. So they can share their journeys here. Unfortunately, we haven't reached out to Grace yet. Um, so yeah, some work for us to do there. Like, what do you actually think about AI?
AI, again, super cliche answer. I think it's brilliant and it helps in so many ways. Obviously, there's so many risks. Sometimes it's not pulling for the right place, especially in a sector like accounting where it is very niche and usually it can give a blanket answer. But there's so many if, buts, and maybes with each client that it is quite difficult. I love it for everyday automations. I find it so useful. I love the AI that's built into Notion. It helps me build amazing templates for the team and for clients and really helps get me on top of my organization. I think it is really, really valuable. Um, However, in accounting, I feel like some things we come across are just a bit too niche, and I wouldn't trust AI with that much work at the moment. But it's brilliant for reading receipts and pulling the data and matching it to transactions. It's really incredible.
Give me an example of some of those niche things, like the edge cases that you think that AI can't handle, and then help me understand how the people doing that task are able to gather the context to actually handle it correctly.
Yeah, so sometimes there's some really niche tax questions. We had one around Airbnb and short lets and VAT. Um, and that's not something that you can pull from AI because there's actually no legislation on it. So it's about pulling lots of different types of legislation, interpreting it, and then checking it and cross referencing it, which again, AI couldn't do. And therefore, we had to do ourselves and obviously speak to someone from HMRC and check it's all okay and that the interpretation was correct. So it's things like that that obviously we can struggle with, um, especially things around capital gains tax and all the intricacies around that, especially for properties, is quite a lot. Um, and so it can be good, but we always err on the side of caution.
Okay, okay. At Mazars, were you doing audit? Were you doing accounts? What type of work were you doing? And then the follow on to that is that um, some of the big four firms have announced that they're actually reducing employee headcount at the both pre qualified and post qualified layers. Do you think that's a trend that will continue? What would you advise leaders of some of those firms now thinking about bringing on good people to train versus potentially some similar work can get done by these AI models for cheaper?
Yeah, so I predominantly spent most of my time in audit. I think it's really interesting to see the decrease purely because there's so many more young people coming through that want those opportunities. However, I don't know the exact numbers for how many apprenticeships they were offering, but just in my office, there were only 3 apprentices that started at that time. So if you're going to reduce that even more, that's basically 1 apprentice a year, which is quite significant. But obviously, that was just in that particular office. And so I think it is interesting. I think maybe the scope of work needs to change for an apprentice if it is quite manual. Or if it can be taken over by AI, then the scope of what an apprentice does needs to change so that there's still those learning opportunities. Otherwise, I think we're going to see a lot of young people really struggle to get into employment because your graduate program, your apprenticeship program is really the bridge into employment. If that bridge is taken away, then how do you get there?
Okay. So linking back to that question about someone in sixth form who is looking at apprenticeships, maybe they've decided uni's not best for them and they want to get into accounting. How would I think about applying to different roles? These applications can be a bit daunting, a bit of a game. Some of the tests can seem quite disconnected to maybe what they thought the job was going to be. Um, and then with that, how would you think about the different exam options? How should they think about weighing up those different companies from the types of qualifications they offer?
Yeah, so the apprenticeship like application pathway is so long. For a lot of businesses, it's 7 to 15 stages. A lot of them start with just maths and English online assessments, and then they go on to non-verbal reasoning and a telephone interview and all these sorts of things. And it really feels like being put through the ringer for no reason. It's not just a CV and a job application and an interview. Like there's so much more to the process, which can seem really daunting. But actually, speaking to other apprentices is really helpful to understand what they went through. There's loads of companies that do webinars on what you should expect from an apprenticeship application process because I went in and I was like, what? Why are there so many stages? This is crazy. And also just kind of like figuring out what they are, and they're quite repetitive. So a lot of companies will sort of follow the same stages and steps. So really just speaking to as many people as possible, and the most important and usually last stage is the assessment center. And that's the most difficult because it's not really something you can prepare for, and you're very much put on the spot and going, here's a project, we need you to produce X, Y, and Z, which can feel the most daunting because, again, you can't prepare for it. It's always different. They never make it the same. So you can't get the answers from someone who did it the previous year. But actually, being your authentic self is probably the best thing you can do. And then in terms of the like levels and qualifications, I think it's really good to go away and do research and understand whether you're being put on a AAT level 3 and 4, and then could you progress to a ACA or an ACCA, or is the pathway actually SEMA instead, or something completely different? And just understand what those qualifications mean, and if you want them, and it leads to the career path that you want. Because obviously, doing ACA can be quite dissimilar from doing SEMA. So really think about where that can lead, and if you'd be happy with that.
What was your exam journey like? So you're a member of the AAT, right? How did you think about both what exams you wanted to do, like which path you wanted to take? Was it given to you, or did you intentionally choose AAT? And then talk to me about like your journey through those exams.
Yeah, so it was given to me. We didn't really have a choice, which is kind of fun. And so that
So you
was the
didn't do like
pathway.
they didn't push you to like ACA or ACCA on, was it like an audit apprenticeship?
Yeah, so that was the option. And I said, I'm quite all right, thank you. And so I did the level 3 and the level 4. And as I spoke about previously, obviously the online college really didn't work for me. So I sat and taught myself at home, which was brilliant and worked for me, and then went to assessment centres and sat all my exams.
And like keen to get into like what was that like? Like balancing that around work with personal responsibilities as well? Like, yeah, help me understand how you navigated through that. Did you pass all of them first time? You make it sound like, oh, you studied at home and then you went in and sat the exams. Like, I'm sure it wasn't that simple.
Yeah, so it was a lot of time, a lot of effort, a couple of tears as well when things weren't making sense. I think for me, I remember we went into our first like online college session, and the tutor was like, "Be prepared to not have a life for the next 3 years." And I thought, "Oh my god, that sounds really scary." But actually, the way that we did it in our apprenticeship was that you went to college in blocks. So, say you'd have like 2 months working, and then you go to college for a week, and then you had the expectation that within 2 to 3 weeks you sit the exam. So it was more like short spurts, if that makes sense, which was great because those spurts could be very intense because you knew that it was ending in 2 weeks. And that worked well for me. So for those 2, 3 weeks, I wouldn't have a life. I would wake up, I'd work, I'd finish at 5, I'd have dinner, and then I'd sit and revise till 10 in the evening. And then I would do that on the weekends as well, knowing that in 2 weeks my life would be back and I could go back to the pub with my friends. So it was about sacrifice, but again, it's about that balance. I passed all of my exams first time except one because that day I'd had an awful breakup with my partner and I was literally a blubbering mess. And then I had to go sit this exam and I failed it by 2% and I was distraught over it. And then I resat it the week later and passed. So it was fine.
Um, Great. So keen to switch to, like, we've talked a lot about like previous work. You're currently running an accounting firm. You're doing fractional CFO work for clients within that. You're co-founding a business, and doing all of your other passion projects with that. What are you focused on right now from a personal growth perspective? Like, what are you working on personally?
Actually, it sounds really silly, but currently I'm working on trying to have a bit more of a work life balance. I've obviously put my all into growing this business, and I'm so happy I had because obviously I'm a big believer in. We used to have this saying in gymnastics: "Full effort in, full effort out." So what you put in, you get out essentially. So I've been putting in loads and getting out loads, which is brilliant. But obviously, with my little fluffy child behind me, I do really want to take more time for myself and like be able to switch off and not work the entire weekend and not have as many late evenings. So I've been really focusing on systemizing like systems and processes so that actually I'm able to work less. And I think for me, that's a really big personal goal for this year.
So how do you think about, so you talked about using systems and processes to free some of your time up. How do you think about like work life? Like, is it something that we should look for balance with? I've heard people also speak about like integration, harmony. Like, how do you think about it? How do you think maybe you're thinking about it wrong? Like, I know that it's a really hard thing to maybe have a mental model about.
Yeah, so I definitely think about it as work life integration, um, because it's my business, it's my child, and so I will do anything for that business. But actually, it's how can I integrate it in. So Milo, my little puppy, has helped me loads because now I've had to schedule in breaks to make sure he can go out and have a wee and be fed and have lunch and all that sort of stuff. So actually, it's that integration of okay, well, I need to take time here, here, and here out for him, which is great. So that's given me a bit more free time and flexibility. And also in the evenings, I want to spend more time with him, whereas I would be like, oh, let me sit and work for a couple of hours so I don't have to work on the weekend or I don't have to work as many late hours. But actually, I'm like, well, actually, none of that is urgent. So let me not work and spend time with him and spend time with my friends and my family, which is actually trying to learn that.
How long have you been in since this like renewed push?
Not that long. I've always tried to preach a better work-life integration, but I've always been terrible at it, purely mostly because I live by myself. So there's no one there to hold me accountable. And as a business owner, I always feel like, oh, if I'm just not doing anything, then I'm being lazy, I'm not being productive. And so then I'll be like, oh, well, let me answer some emails, let me just do a bit of this, let me do a bit of that. Whereas now I'm trying to be a bit more strict with myself.
Yeah, give yourself the permission to like do other things.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Do you find it stressful, like all your work?
Yeah, of course.
like, so talk to me about that stress. Like, how does stress hit you? How do you manage it? Everyone deals with stress differently, and everyone gets stress differently in different areas. Like, what's it like for you?
Yeah, definitely. So I like to talk about my stress threshold. So stuff that used to stress me out at the beginning wouldn't bat an eyelid at now. The stuff that stressed me out now would have genuinely given me a heart attack at the beginning. So running a business is definitely all about increasing that stress threshold and understanding how much like stress you can actually deal with, and realizing that things aren't that deep and that it will work out. And so for me, if I'm stressed, I just need to deal with the problem, because if I don't, then I'm not a happy person to be around. So, for example, if I'm trying to enjoy a movie with my family and I'm stressed, I'm actually not present. And everyone can see that. So then I'm not spending quality time with the people that I should be. Um, Stress also, I'll just cry, have a big cry, get it all out. Usually makes it a bit better.
What do you do in that moment? So if you're not present, you're not feeling like engaged in the film. What do you have any like tools or techniques to like bring you into that moment?
Oh, absolutely not. I'm like, sorry, I need to go get my laptop and sort this out.
But that's the tool, right? Like you're going off and like taking action on whatever it was that was stressing you out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you just tackle it head on. Okay, so how can I increase my stress threshold?
Unfortunately, it's just by going through more stressful things.
Okay, like hand in the fire
Yeah.
sounds painful. Um, okay, so Grace, would you say that you're like a natural born entrepreneur? Do you think that entrepreneurship is nature, or do you think it's actually nurture and something that can come out of you?
I think it's a bit of both. I think some people are definitely born with it. You hear people starting clothing brands when they're like 12 years old, and that was probably just born into them. But I also think it can be nurture, and also, especially in this day and age where there is a cost of living crisis, and sometimes your salary just isn't enough because life is so expensive, that actually sometimes entrepreneurship is bought out of necessity. So, oh, I need a couple of extra £100 this month to make my life the best it could possibly be. And therefore, people are being more entrepreneurial.
Okay. And what would you advise like people maybe doing accounting now that feel like they have this urge, this edge to either earn a bit more money or do something a little bit more independently, a little bit more of their own agency? What would you advise them to do other than just starting now? I think you might suggest that they just get into it and
Yeah.
start something. I'd love to understand like other tactical tips.
I think for me, what I did is I actually went to Accountex North when I was thinking of starting my own practice, just to hear people's journeys, experiences, expertise, and meet other people that were either wanting to do the same or had done the same. And actually, for me, that was incredibly valuable to understand if this is like almost a community that I wanted to be involved in. And hearing from other people and their experiences and how they've done things, and speak to vendors, because obviously it's a whole big world out there that you need to understand. So, actually, more of that educational piece of going and listening to people and speaking to vendors and understanding is really important.
Okay. So I think a lot of people go to these events like quite aimlessly, like maybe catch up with a few vendors they're using and maybe see what this AI thing is
Yeah.
all about. What would be your advice to anyone going to these events? Like, how do you make sure that you get the most out of them?
So I always make sure to read the like speaker program beforehand, and always highlight, or if they've got an app, then like add things in that I know I want to go like listen to, because at the end of the day it is about learning. So I make sure to do all of that first and then highlight the vendors I want to speak to, whether it is just a cheeky catch up with your vendors or understanding a new software. And then also just spending time speaking to other accountants, because we run a remote firm. So we never really get to see people in person unless we make the effort to go see them. So actually seeing people at these events is really lovely.
Okay. Talk to me about like remote versus in person. So you run a remote firm. Like, talk to me about some of the strengths of that, the intention of why you do that. Is it remote just for your interactions with your clients, or is it remote as a team? And then, yeah, what are some of the drawbacks that you're focused on?
Yeah, so we're completely remote. So the whole team is remote around the UK. Obviously, the positives of that is I don't need to pay for an office space. I don't need to pay business rates. So lucky me. It means I can work from anywhere and there's no expectation. And I just wanted that because I didn't enjoy working in an office. And I liked to think about other people quite a lot. And for me, I knew that eventually I probably would employ someone that had kids or things like that. And actually, for them, working from home is a lot easier for them. It means if their kids are sick, they can just look after them. There's no expectation to come in the office. There's no commute, nothing like that. Um, if they want to go to the doctors, they can just pop to the doctors. So we have fully flexible working. So there's not necessarily any core hours. You can bob to your kids' parents' evening. Like you can go and take your kids to school and pick them up, and there's no expectation that that's not okay. You don't need to ask for permission. You can just go and do it. And for me, that's really important. Obviously, the drawbacks of having a remote firm is that, especially finding now that obviously we're bringing people in, line managers being created, but you learn a lot through osmosis by sitting next to the owner or the CEO and learning how they do things. But obviously, because they're not next to me when I'm doing those sort of more operational things, they're not learning them because they're not there. And that's okay. So we have a bit more like manager training than potentially other people because there's so many questions about how the rest of the business runs because they just focus on what they're doing, which isn't necessarily a drawback. It's just that you need to put a bit more effort into it, which is absolutely fine. But for me, one of my favorite things about working remote is that you can recruit from anywhere. And that's actually really valuable to find the best talent.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So how do you think about sense of community and then accountability when remote?
Yeah, so we have a lot more meetings. We usually have a morning and an afternoon meeting to check in with everyone and see how everyone's going. Everyone's got my number. So pretty much we text like all day, every day anyway. So there is a lot of communication, and that communication is really important, especially with the delegation of work. There's deadlines, everyone can see them. It's all very open. Um, and so I think that's the best way that can work.
Do you find that adds a like meeting fatigue, like a communication fatigue? You can't have that quick 30-second pass someone catch up. It always has the full bits and bobs of a full meeting.
Not really. So we always block out half an hour, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to take half an hour. So if it takes 5 minutes, it takes 5 minutes. But actually, if we want to have a chit chat about our lives, then it definitely will take half an hour. But we meet up usually on a quarterly basis and at those expos and shows anyway. So we do see each other in person. It's not like I've never met any of them before. Um, but I don't feel like there is meeting fatigue, and it's all very open communication. Oh, do you want to come to this meeting? No, I've got better things to do. That's all right. We just take it out of the diary. But all the Monday and Thursday ones are mandatory just because we have some people that work Monday to Thursday and some people work Monday to Friday. So we have like a big team meeting on the Monday morning and the Thursday afternoon just to kind of start the week and then wrap up the week and understand where we're at.
Do you have specific traits, like specific non-obvious traits that you hire for where you think people excel more in remote environments?
Not particularly. For me, during the process, it's about do I want to be friends with this person? Because that's what it is at the end of the day. Like for us, it's about creating like a big Hardy accounting family where we can be vulnerable and be honest and be truthful. And if we're struggling, then we can say it, and everyone knows that there's no judgment. No one's going to be told off. Like it's just having that open communication. So for me, it's about hiring people that I want to be friends with, and then also that their communication is honest. So one of the interview questions we have is how do you deal with stress? I don't want the answer of oh I don't deal like I just like don't get stressed. That's not a good answer. Like I look for people that go, do you know what, have a bit of a bitch to my partner and have a big cry and I eat some chocolate. It's about having that open honesty that I look for.